I'm about to break the cardinal rule of female psychology: never tell men how we really think. But watching good men destroy themselves while toxic women gaslight them into believing they're the problem, I can't stay silent anymore. Today, I'm going to tell you about 10 signs that she's cheating, but blaming you for it. These aren't theories. These are psychological patterns I've observed again and again. And most importantly, I'll teach you to recognize these manipulations so you never doubt your intuition again. But before we begin, hit that like button if you're ready to hear the truth. Subscribe to this channel if you want more honest conversations about relationships. And write in the comments what city you're watching from. I'm curious to see where the men who are ready for truth are watching from. Let me be clear. This isn't about hating women or becoming cynical. This is about protecting your mental health and recognizing when someone is gaslighting you into believing you're the problem when you're actually the victim. Sign 1. Gaslighting your suspicions. The first and most insidious sign is when she makes you feel crazy for noticing obvious changes. You say, "You've changed, you've become colder." She responds, "You're too sensitive, I'm just stressed at work. You're becoming unbearable with your suspicions." Here's what's happening psychologically. This is classic gaslighting. Instead of explaining her behavior, she attacks your perception of reality. Why? Because a guilty conscience has only 2 exits: confess or shift the blame. When someone is doing something they know is wrong, they have 2 choices: take responsibility or make the other person question their reality. Guess which one is easier? And if you're thinking right now, "God, this sounds exactly like my situation," keep watching, it gets worse. A cheating woman becomes a master manipulator, not because she's evil, but because she's protecting herself from the pain of admitting what she's done. She'll make you question everything: your memory, your perceptions, your emotional intelligence. She'll say things like, "You're imagining things. You're being paranoid. You always think the worst of people. You're looking for problems that don't exist." Here's the brutal truth. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, it probably is. Your subconscious picks up on micro-expressions, changes in vocal tone, shifts in body language that your conscious mind might miss. That uncomfortable feeling in your chest isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition. When a woman starts making you feel crazy for noticing obvious changes, she's not protecting the relationship. She's protecting her secret. And that secret is eating away at everything you've built together. The most devastating part is that she'll use your love against you. She knows you want to believe her, you want to trust her, you want to think the best of her. So she exploits that love to make you ignore your own instincts. But your instincts exist for a reason. They're your psychological immune system, designed to protect you from emotional harm. When someone consistently makes you doubt those instincts, they're compromising your ability to protect yourself. Remember, a person who truly cares about your feelings doesn't dismiss your concerns. They address them. They work to understand why you feel the way you do, and they make changes to help you feel more secure. They don't attack your character for having normal human reactions to abnormal behavior. This psychological manipulation creates a devastating cycle. The more you notice changes in her behavior, the more she makes you feel crazy for noticing. The more you feel crazy, the more you doubt yourself. The more you doubt yourself, the less likely you are to trust your instincts. And the less you trust your instincts, the easier it becomes for her to manipulate you. It's a form of psychological warfare, designed to make you surrender your own perception of reality. And once you surrender that, you've lost the ability to protect yourself from further manipulation. Sign 2. Suddenly all your flaws are unbearable. Things that used to be cute quirks are now annoying habits. You never listen. You're not romantic. You've gained weight. You work too much. You don't understand me. The psychology here is devastating. She's creating moral justification for cheating. In her mind, she's building a narrative. I'm cheating because he's a bad partner. It's a way to remove guilt from herself and place responsibility on you. This is emotional abuse disguised as relationship feedback. She's not trying to improve the relationship. She's building a case for why the relationship deserves to be destroyed. The cruelest part, you might actually start believing it. You might think, maybe I have been neglecting her. Maybe I should be more romantic. You start changing yourself to fit her new complaints, not realizing that the goalposts will keep moving because the real problem isn't you, it's her guilt. But the most diabolical thing is yet to come. When you try to address these complaints, to become the man she's claiming she wants, she'll find new problems. If you become more romantic, you're trying too hard. If you give her more attention, you're clingy. If you work less, you're lazy. Why? Because these aren't real complaints about real problems. They're justifications for a decision she's already made. This psychological pattern serves multiple purposes for her. First, it makes the cheating feel justified rather than selfish. Second, it shifts focus away from her behavior and onto yours. Third, it creates a narrative where she's the victim of a bad relationship rather than the perpetrator of betrayal. The most insidious aspect is how it attacks your self-worth. These complaints often target the deepest insecurities men have about themselves. Am I good enough? Am I attractive enough? Am I successful enough? She's weaponizing your vulnerabilities against you. Here's what you need to understand. When someone suddenly finds everything wrong with you after years of finding those same traits acceptable or even lovable, the problem isn't that you've changed. The problem is that their feelings have changed, and they can't admit it. A person who truly loves you works with your flaws, not against them. They help you grow. They don't tear you down. They see your efforts to improve. They don't move the goalposts every time you make progress. This systematic destruction of your self-esteem serves another purpose. It makes you grateful for any crumbs of affection she throws your way. When you believe you're fundamentally flawed, you become thankful for any moment when she's not criticizing you. You start accepting treatment that you would never have tolerated before because you've been convinced you don't deserve better. The psychological damage from this type of manipulation can last long after the relationship ends. Many men carry these criticisms forward, believing that they're somehow fundamentally inadequate as partners. They don't realize that these weren't honest assessments of their character. They were weapons used to justify betrayal. Sign 3, projecting her own behavior onto you. She starts accusing you of doing what she's actually doing. Suddenly, she's convinced you're cheating, flirting with coworkers, or hiding something. Where do these suspicions come from? Because infidelity is now on her mind 24/7. She's projecting her behavior onto you. This is one of the most psychologically revealing signs. Projection is a defense mechanism where people attribute their own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors to others. When someone is cheating, they become hyper-aware of the possibility of cheating. They see it everywhere because it's consuming their mental space. This projection serves multiple psychological purposes. It deflects attention from her behavior. It makes her feel less guilty because everyone does it. It creates justification for her actions because he probably cheats too. And it puts you on the defensive instead of asking questions. If your partner suddenly becomes suspicious of your every move, especially if this suspicion seems to come out of nowhere, pay attention. Often, the person who's most afraid of being cheated on is the one doing the cheating. The psychology behind this is fascinating and disturbing. When someone crosses a moral boundary, their entire worldview shifts. If they're capable of betrayal, then everyone must be capable of betrayal. If they can lie convincingly, then everyone must be lying. If they can justify their actions, then everyone must be rationalizing bad behavior. This creates a paranoid mindset where trust becomes impossible. Not because you're untrustworthy, but because she's lost the ability to believe in trustworthiness at all. She's become someone she wouldn't trust, so she can't trust anyone. The cruelest irony is that while she's accusing you of betrayal, she's actively betraying you. While she's demanding transparency from you, she's living a double life. While she's testing your loyalty, she's destroying the foundation of your relationship. This projection also serves as a form of emotional preparation. By convincing herself that you're probably cheating too, she's making her own cheating feel less devastating. In her mind, you're both bad people, so her behavior isn't really that much worse than yours. But here's what you need to remember. Her suspicions say nothing about you and everything about her. Her inability to trust reflects her own untrustworthiness. Her accusations reveal her own guilt, not your behavior. The most damaging aspect of this projection is how it forces you to prove negatives. How do you prove you're not hiding something? How do you prove you're not thinking about other women? How do you prove you're not capable of betrayal? It's impossible, which is exactly the point. She creates a situation where you're constantly defending yourself against accusations that have no basis in reality. This keeps you off balance, keeps you focused on proving your innocence rather than questioning her behavior, and creates a dynamic where you're always the one on trial. Meanwhile, her real betrayal continues unchallenged because all your energy is focused on defending against imaginary crimes instead of investigating actual ones. Sign 4. Emotional withdrawal with blame. She becomes cold, but when you notice, it's somehow your fault. You don't give me space. You're too needy. I can't be close to someone who doesn't understand my needs. The psychology here is devastating. Emotional closeness with you becomes painful because it triggers guilt. It's easier to create distance and blame you for demanding too much. Think about it. If she's developing feelings for someone else, or if she's already crossed lines, being emotionally intimate with you feels like betrayal on multiple levels. She's betraying you, but she's also betraying this new connection by pretending to be happy with you. So what does she do? She creates distance, but she can't just say, I need distance because I'm developing feelings for someone else. Instead, she makes the distance your fault. This psychological shift is profound. When someone is truly committed to a relationship, they want emotional connection. They crave intimacy, conversation, shared experiences. They want to feel close to their partner, not distant from them. But when someone has emotionally moved on, their partner's attempts at connection feel burdensome. Every conversation feels forced. Every gesture of love feels like pressure. Every moment of intimacy feels like a lie. The cruelest part is how she frames this withdrawal. Instead of taking responsibility for her changed feelings, she makes your natural desire for connection seem pathological. Your love becomes neediness. Your concern becomes suffocation. Your desire to maintain what you had becomes not giving her space. This is particularly devastating because it attacks the very foundation of partnership. Relationships require emotional investment from both people. When one person withdraws that investment but blames the other person for noticing, it creates an impossible situation. You're being punished for caring. You're being blamed for wanting what every person in a relationship deserves: emotional connection with your partner. You're being made to feel guilty for expecting the woman you love to actually want to spend time with you. Pay attention to the next signs. They show that the process has gone very far. This emotional withdrawal isn't temporary stress or a rough patch. It's a fundamental shift in how she sees the relationship. She's no longer invested in maintaining what you have together. She's protecting her energy for someone or something else. And the blame? That's just her way of avoiding responsibility for abandoning the relationship while still being in it. The psychological manipulation here is particularly cruel because it uses your own love against you. The more you care, the more needy you appear. The more you try to connect, the more suffocating you become. The more you fight for the relationship, the more controlling you seem. It's a rigged game where your greatest strengths, your capacity for love, your commitment to the relationship, your desire for connection, are reframed as weaknesses and character flaws. Many men respond to this manipulation by withdrawing themselves, thinking that giving her space will bring her back. But that's not what's happening here. She's not pulling away because she needs space. She's pulling away because she's emotionally investing elsewhere. Your withdrawal just makes it easier for her to continue her betrayal without feeling guilty about it. Sign 5. Changes in intimacy become your fault. Intimacy either completely disappears or becomes mechanical. And when you notice, you only think about sex. I'm not in the mood because of your behavior. You don't create a romantic atmosphere. The psychology here is cognitive dissonance at its worst. Physical closeness with you, when she's emotionally or physically with someone else, creates unbearable internal conflict. It's easier to blame you for the wrong approach than admit her guilt. Intimacy is the deepest form of vulnerability. When someone is betraying that trust, continuing to be intimate feels like a lie within a lie. So the brain creates explanations to avoid the discomfort. The change is often dramatic and confusing. Someone who used to be warm and responsive becomes cold and rejecting. Someone who used to initiate becomes passive. Someone who used to enjoy physical connection suddenly finds every attempt inadequate or inappropriate. What's really happening is that she's comparing every moment with you to her affair or emotional connection elsewhere. When your partner is getting excitement and novelty from someone else, everything with you feels routine and inadequate by comparison. The guilt also creates a complex psychological response. Being intimate with you while thinking about someone else makes her feel like she's cheating on her affair partner, so she rejects you but can't admit the real reason. Instead, she makes it your fault. This is particularly cruel because it attacks one of the most vulnerable aspects of a relationship. Sexual rejection coupled with blame doesn't just hurt the relationship, it damages self-esteem and creates lasting insecurity. And here's where many men break. They start believing they're bad lovers, unromantic, or sexually inadequate. They don't realize they're not being rejected because of who they are. They're being rejected because of what she's done. The blame serves multiple purposes. It deflects from her real reason for withdrawal. It makes you focus on fixing yourself rather than questioning her behavior. And it creates guilt that prevents you from demanding honesty about what's really happening. But here's what you need to understand. Sudden, dramatic changes in intimacy are never really about romance or technique or atmosphere. They're about emotional connection. And if she's emotionally connected to someone else, no amount of flowers or candles or perfect technique will fix what's actually broken. Someone who truly loves you doesn't punish you for wanting physical and emotional connection. They don't make you feel guilty for desiring intimacy. They work with you to address problems. They don't blame you for problems they've created. The psychological damage from sexual rejection combined with blame is particularly deep because it attacks fundamental aspects of masculine identity. Men often tie their worth as partners to their ability to please their women sexually and romantically. When that's rejected and blamed, it strikes at the core of how men see themselves. This manipulation also creates a cycle of self-doubt that extends far beyond the bedroom. If you can't trust your instincts about what used to work in your relationship, if your expressions of love are consistently reframed as inadequate, you begin to question your ability to love anyone properly. Many men carry this damage into future relationships, constantly second-guessing themselves, afraid to express desire, convinced that they're somehow fundamentally flawed as romantic partners. They don't realize that they weren't failing at love. They were trying to love someone who had already committed to betraying that love. Sign 6, secrecy justified by moral high ground. Phone always face down, passwords changed, stepping away to take calls. When you ask, you don't trust me. Healthy relationships are built on trust, not control. You're acting like you own me. She uses principles of healthy relationships as weapons against you. Yes, trust is important, but when behavior changes dramatically, questions are natural. This is perhaps the most sophisticated manipulation because it uses your own values against you. Most good men believe in trust, respect, and independence in relationships. She exploits these beliefs to shame you for having natural human reactions to suspicious behavior. Here's the psychological trap. She's using your moral principles to protect her immoral behavior. She's essentially saying, if you were a good person, you wouldn't question my obvious lies. The healthy relationship advice she's throwing at you isn't wrong in normal circumstances, but these aren't normal circumstances. When someone's behavior changes dramatically, when they become secretive about things that were previously open, questioning those changes isn't controlling, it's intelligent. Trust is earned and maintained through consistent, trustworthy behavior. When that behavior changes, trust naturally needs to be rebuilt. A person with nothing to hide doesn't get angry at reasonable questions. They answer them. The most insidious part of this manipulation is that it makes you question your own moral compass. You start thinking maybe you are being controlling, maybe you don't trust enough, maybe you're the problem in this relationship. But here's what you need to understand. A person who cares about your feelings doesn't dismiss your concerns. They address them. If she had nothing to hide, she would say, I can see why this seems suspicious. Let me explain what's going on and help you feel more secure. Instead, she attacks your character for having normal human reactions to abnormal behavior. This moral manipulation is particularly effective because it makes you afraid to ask questions. You don't want to be controlling, so you suppress your instincts. You don't want to be untrusting, so you ignore obvious red flags. You don't want to be possessive, so you accept being lied to. And here's where many men break and start believing they really are toxic. The woman who is hiding something will always make the problem your character rather than her behavior. She'll make you focus on being better rather than demanding honesty. She'll convince you that questioning lies makes you a bad person rather than an intelligent one. But remember, your need for honesty in a relationship isn't a character flaw. Your ability to notice when something is wrong isn't a weakness. Your desire for transparency isn't controlling. It's the foundation of genuine intimacy. The psychological damage from this type of manipulation is profound because it attacks your moral identity. She's not just saying you're wrong. She's saying you're a bad person for noticing she's lying. She's not just defending her secrets. She's making you feel guilty for expecting honesty. This creates a situation where you become afraid of your own instincts. You start viewing your natural protective mechanisms as character flaws. You begin to see your desire for truth as evidence of your own toxicity. Many men internalize this manipulation so deeply that they become afraid to ask reasonable questions in future relationships. They've been trained to view any expectation of transparency as controlling behavior. They've been convinced that love means accepting obvious lies without question. Sign 7. New standards based on mysterious comparisons. Suddenly she has new needs that never existed before. A real man should. Other men do it for their women. You were never as romantic as. The psychology, she's comparing you to her new interest but can't say it directly. Instead, she creates an image of the perfect man against which you look like a failure. This sign is particularly devastating because it rewrites your entire relationship history. Things that she used to love about you become inadequate. Standards that never mattered before become essential. You feel like you're failing a test you didn't know you were taking. This comparison trap is psychologically devastating for several reasons. You're being judged against standards that were never established in your relationship. You're competing with someone you don't know exists. Your previous strengths are reframed as weaknesses, and nothing you do can measure up because the comparison isn't fair. The woman doing this might not even realize she's being unfair. She's living in the excitement of a new connection and has forgotten that all relationships have ordinary moments. The beginning stages of any relationship or affair are filled with novelty and intensity that can't be maintained long term. But instead of recognizing this psychological reality, she blames you for not providing constant excitement and romance that no human being can sustain. The cruelest part is that these new standards often contradict everything she previously valued about you. If she used to love your practical nature, suddenly you're not spontaneous enough. If she used to appreciate your stability, suddenly you're boring. If she used to value your consistency, suddenly you're predictable. This isn't growth or evolving needs. This is rewriting history to justify present feelings. You'll find yourself trying to become someone completely different, not understanding that the problem isn't who you are. The problem is that she's comparing you to someone else. You're trying to compete with another person's highlight reel, using your everyday reality. Here's what you need to understand. When someone suddenly decides that everything they used to love about you is now inadequate, they haven't discovered new needs. They've discovered new options. And instead of being honest about that discovery, they're making you feel insufficient for not being someone else. The woman who truly loves you doesn't suddenly find your core personality traits unacceptable. She doesn't create impossible standards based on mysterious comparisons. She doesn't make you feel like you need to completely transform yourself to be worthy of her love. This psychological manipulation is particularly cruel because it makes you question your entire identity. You start wondering if you've been living your life wrong, if your personality is fundamentally flawed, if everything you thought you knew about yourself is incorrect. The constant shifting standards create a state of chronic anxiety where you never know what will be acceptable tomorrow. Something she loves today might be a problem next week. Something she never cared about before might suddenly become a relationship-ending issue. This keeps you constantly off balance, constantly trying to change, constantly seeking her approval. It makes you forget that healthy relationships involve accepting and loving someone as they are, not constantly demanding they become someone else. Many men lose themselves completely in this process, changing everything about themselves to meet ever-shifting standards, only to discover that no amount of change will ever be enough because the real problem was never who they were. It was that she wanted someone else entirely. Sign 8. Your attempts to reconnect are labeled as control. Any attempt to restore intimacy meets resistance. You're trying to control me. You don't accept me as I am. Healthy relationships don't require this much work. The psychology. Your attempts to save the relationship are perceived as threats to her new life. She's already emotionally left, and your love now feels like harassment to her. This might be the most heartbreaking sign because it punishes you for caring. Every gesture of love, every attempt to reconnect, every effort to rebuild what you've lost together gets twisted into something negative. Here's the cruel psychology. When someone has mentally checked out of a relationship, expressions of love from their partner feel burdensome. It's like someone trying to repair a house that you've already decided to abandon. The repair efforts don't feel helpful. They feel like they're trapping you in something you want to escape. She can't admit that she's emotionally moved on, so she reframes your love as harassment. Your consistency becomes pressure. Your affection becomes manipulation. Your desire to save your relationship becomes control. This is emotional abuse disguised as relationship wisdom. She's using the language of healthy relationships to justify abandoning your relationship without taking responsibility for that choice. The most insidious aspect is that it makes you afraid to express love. You start walking on eggshells, afraid that any gesture of affection will be labeled as needy or controlling. You begin to suppress your natural instincts to care for and connect with your partner. And here's the brutal truth. Someone who truly loves you doesn't punish you for trying to love them back. They might say they need space, they might ask for different expressions of love, but they don't attack your character for caring about the relationship. When your attempts to show love are consistently reframed as character flaws, you're not dealing with relationship problems. You're dealing with someone who wants out, but doesn't have the courage to say so directly. The psychological damage this causes is profound. You start believing that your love is toxic, that your care is unwanted, that your desire for connection is pathological. You begin to question whether you are capable of healthy love at all. But here's what you need to remember. The problem isn't that you love too much or care too deeply. The problem is that you're trying to love someone who has already decided to stop receiving that love. You're offering water to someone who is no longer thirsty because they're drinking from another well. Your love isn't the problem. Her inability to receive it honestly is the problem. Your desire for connection isn't controlling. Her fear of that connection because it conflicts with her new interests is the problem. This manipulation is particularly devastating because it reframes your greatest strengths as your biggest weaknesses. Your loyalty becomes clinginess. Your commitment becomes pressure. Your love becomes control. It creates a psychological trap where any action you take to save the relationship becomes evidence that you're the problem. If you try harder, you're desperate. If you back off, you don't care enough. If you communicate your needs, you're demanding. If you stop communicating, you're giving up. There's no winning because the game itself is rigged. She's not looking for ways to reconnect. She's looking for reasons to justify her disconnection. She's not trying to solve relationship problems. She's trying to create justifications for relationship abandonment. Many men internalize this manipulation so deeply that they become afraid of their own love. They start viewing their capacity for care as a character flaw. They begin to suppress their natural desire for connection, convinced that loving deeply makes them toxic partners. Sign 9. Future plans mysteriously exclude you. She talks about the future, but you're not in it. I'm thinking about moving. I need time to think about my life. Maybe we should take a break. When you try to discuss your shared future, you're rushing things. You're not letting me breathe. The psychology. She's already envisioning a future without you, possibly with someone else. Your plans now feel like a prison to her. This sign represents the death of partnership. A relationship dies when one person stops including the other in their vision of tomorrow. When we becomes I in all future conversations, the relationship is already over in one person's mind. This psychological shift is profound. When someone is truly committed to a relationship, they naturally include their partner in future thinking. Planning together is an expression of commitment, hope, and shared vision. But when someone has emotionally moved on, Their partner's inclusion in future plans feels suffocating rather than exciting. Every conversation about our future becomes a reminder of a commitment they no longer want to keep. The cruelest part is how this affects the loyal partner. You find yourself afraid to bring up anything future-related because it seems to push her further away. You stop talking about relationship goals, stop making long-term plans, start living day by day just to avoid conflict. This is how a relationship dies, not with a dramatic ending, but with the slow elimination of a shared tomorrow. When someone starts planning a life that doesn't include you, they've already left emotionally. The physical departure is just paperwork at that point. The last two signs show that the process is almost irreversible. What makes this particularly painful is the gaslighting that accompanies it. When you notice that you're being excluded from her future plans and you try to discuss it, she makes it your fault for pressuring her or not giving her space. But here's the truth. Someone who sees a future with you doesn't need to be convinced to include you in their plans. Someone who wants to build a life with you doesn't get annoyed when you try to plan that life together. When we disappears from her vocabulary and gets replaced with I, when shared dreams become individual pursuits, when your presence in her future feels like an obstacle rather than an asset, the relationship is already over. She just hasn't told you yet. The psychological damage from this exclusion is particularly deep because it attacks your sense of belonging and security. Humans are wired to need a sense of future stability, especially in their most intimate relationships. When that's suddenly removed without explanation, it creates profound anxiety and confusion. You start living in constant uncertainty, never knowing if today might be the day she announces she's leaving. You can't make plans, can't feel secure, can't build anything stable because you never know how long you'll be included in her life. This uncertainty becomes a form of psychological torture. You're living with someone who has essentially decided you have no future together, but they haven't told you directly. You're being slowly written out of her life story while being expected to continue playing your role as if nothing has changed. Many men respond to this by trying to prove their value, working harder to become someone worth including in her future. But they don't realize that the decision to exclude them wasn't based on their worth. It was based on her desire to include someone else instead. Sign 10. When caught, she makes her cheating your fault. The final stage, when the cheating is exposed, she says, "You drove me to this. If you were a better husband, this wouldn't have happened. I was unhappy and you ignored it." The psychology. Even in the moment of complete exposure, she cannot take responsibility. The cheating becomes your fault because admitting guilt would destroy the entire narrative she's created. This is the nuclear option of blame shifting. Even when caught red-handed, when all the evidence is undeniable, she finds a way to make you the villain in the story of your own betrayal. This is the final psychological manipulation, the complete inversion of responsibility. Even when caught in the most indefensible act, she manages to make herself the victim and you the perpetrator. The psychology behind this is pure self-preservation. Admitting that she chose to cheat would mean admitting that she's capable of deep betrayal, that she's hurt someone who loved her, that she's destroyed something valuable for temporary pleasure. That level of responsibility is too heavy for some people to bear. So instead, they rewrite the story. The cheating becomes inevitable. You become the villain who forced their hand. They become the victim who had no choice but to seek love elsewhere. This reframing serves multiple psychological purposes. It preserves their self-image as a good person. It justifies their behavior retroactively. It prevents them from feeling guilt, and it maintains their victim status even as the perpetrator. The most devastating part for the betrayed partner is that this manipulation often works partially. You start questioning whether you really were neglectful, whether you really did miss signs of her unhappiness, whether you really did drive her away. But here's what you need to understand. Even if you were an imperfect partner, even if you made mistakes, even if you could have been better, none of that justifies cheating. Absolutely none of it. In a healthy relationship, when someone is unhappy, they communicate. They work on problems together. They seek counseling. They give their partner a chance to address issues. They don't secretly start a relationship with someone else and then blame their partner for forcing them to betray their vows. The choice to cheat is always a choice. It's never an inevitable result of someone else's behavior. It's a decision to prioritize temporary feelings over long-term commitments, to value new excitement over loyal love, to choose deception over honesty. When someone makes that choice and then blames you for it, they're committing a second betrayal, the betrayal of truth itself. This final manipulation is particularly devastating because it comes at your most vulnerable moment. You've just discovered that your entire relationship was built on lies, that the person you trusted most has been betraying you, that your life together was a performance while she lived a secret reality. And in that moment of complete vulnerability, instead of remorse or accountability, you get blame. Instead of honesty about her choices, you get accusations about your failures. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions, she makes you responsible for them. This creates a psychological wound that can take years to heal. Not only do you have to process the betrayal itself, but you also have to untangle the web of lies she's created about why it happened. You have to separate the real problems in your relationship from the manufactured justifications for her cheating. Many men get trapped in this final manipulation, spending years trying to understand what they did wrong, how they could have prevented it, what they should have done differently. They don't realize that this self-blame is exactly what she wanted, for you to take responsibility for her choices so she doesn't have to. I know this was difficult to hear, but understanding these patterns can save you from months or years of doubting your own sanity. Remember, if your intuition is telling you something is wrong, it's right. Trust yourself. You're not paranoid, you're not controlling, you're not toxic. You're a man who senses he's being betrayed, and you have the right to name that feeling. The woman who truly loves you doesn't punish you for caring about the relationship. She doesn't make you feel crazy for noticing changes in her behavior. She doesn't blame you for her choices. She doesn't use your love as evidence of your toxicity. Love shouldn't make you question your reality. Love shouldn't make you afraid to express your feelings. Love shouldn't require you to ignore obvious red flags. Love shouldn't force you to accept being treated poorly in the name of understanding and trust. Your emotional intelligence is an asset, not a liability. Your ability to notice when something is wrong is a strength, not a weakness. Your desire for honesty and connection is normal, not needy. If you recognize these patterns in your relationship, please understand. This is not about fixing yourself to win her back. This is about recognizing manipulation and protecting your mental health. You cannot love someone out of betrayal. You cannot communicate your way out of being gaslighted. You cannot prove your worth to someone who has already decided you're worthless. What you can do is trust yourself. Trust your perceptions. Trust your feelings. Trust your worth. The signs I've shared with you today aren't just relationship red flags. They're psychological warfare tactics designed to make you question your own reality. When someone uses these against you, they're not trying to improve your relationship. They're trying to avoid responsibility for destroying it. Understanding these patterns isn't about becoming cynical or bitter toward women. It's about developing the psychological immunity you need to protect yourself from manipulation. It's about learning to recognize when someone is using your love against you. The most important thing you can take from this is that your instincts matter. That uncomfortable feeling in your gut when something doesn't add up, that's not paranoia. That's your subconscious mind processing information that your conscious mind might be missing. When someone consistently makes you doubt those instincts, when they make you feel crazy for noticing obvious changes, when they blame you for their behavior, you're not dealing with relationship problems. You're dealing with psychological manipulation. If you're living through this right now, I want you to know that you're not alone. Thousands of men have been exactly where you are, questioning their sanity, wondering if they're the problem, trying desperately to fix something that was broken by someone else's choices. You deserve better than being gaslighted into accepting betrayal. You deserve better than having your love weaponized against you. You deserve better than being blamed for someone else's decision to cheat. Most importantly, you deserve to trust your own perceptions. You deserve to have your concerns taken seriously. You deserve honesty, even when that honesty is painful. The right woman will never make you question your worth or your reality. The right woman will value your love, not use it to manipulate you. The right woman will take responsibility for her actions instead of blaming you for them. Remember these patterns, remember these signs, and remember that recognizing manipulation doesn't make you cynical, it makes you wise. Write in the comments a number from 1 to 10. How many of these signs you recognized in your own relationships? No details needed, just a number. And remember, knowing these patterns doesn't make you bitter, it makes you better prepared. Stay strong, stay aware, and remember, the person who truly loves you will never make you question whether you deserve that love.